When was the moment you realised that Jeremy Corbyn wasn't going to be the Prime Minister?
Way, way, way before the election. The 2017 election was extraordinary, and it's what I would say to all of your listeners and comrades out there: never, ever, ever allow the establishment or the right wing to obliterate 2017. They talk a lot about 2019 and Corbynism was destroyed because they never talk about 2017. It proved that a radical leader with a radical transformative program was popular in the electorate, in the British electorate, and we should always seize on that. Both Corbyn and MacDonald had done a remarkable thing. It's just a phenomenon that I've never experienced before. And so after 2017, on June the 9th, Corbyn was untouchable. And for the remainder of that year, he was in a pretty strong position. But it started to go wrong, in my opinion, in early 2018. The whole issue, the seeds of a second vote, the people's vote, and had started to be sown. And it was at that juncture that Jeremy should have been a strong leader. And unfortunately, he wasn't. And we seen then during 2018 the people's vote gaining in popularity. We were aware, because we were constantly told it by the likes of The Guardian and others, that the vast majority of Labour Party members were Remainers and wanted to look once again at and challenge the referendum. And it was evident to me that we were on the beginning of a slippery slope, which I raised with Jeremy. Right through 2018, it was growing and growing. You couldn't dismiss 1 million people out on the streets. You couldn't dismiss it. And a vacuum began to emerge in terms of leadership, with leading members of the Labour Party supporting and giving credence to the idea that a second vote and a people's vote was something that was legitimate. Of course...
Let's go back a bit. How does that happen? 2017, you get this extraordinary result, and it's because Labour have basically said, we recognise the result of the referendum. Now, some people say, well, that was never good enough. Well, it was. So why didn't leading Labour MPs stick to that position? Why did they suddenly go off in different directions?
Well, you need a leader. It's why didn't Jeremy stick to that position? And I urged Jeremy and those around him to get him to send a letter out, a personal letter to every Labour Party member to say, look, I know there's many of you are worried and are Remainers, but trust me, we've just fought an election saying we would recognise the 2016 referendum. This is about democracy, and this is the road for us to get into number 10. Trust me, stick with me. 70% of them may have been Remainers, 90% of them were Corbynites, were Corbyn supporters. He should have done that very early on. He should have said, I'm going to spend the next how many years up to the next election speaking to Remainers and trying to find out what their fears are so that we can put together an appropriate programme. But that is the way. You should have said to Emily Thornberry and Keir Starmer, you have a different view. You go and argue that from the backbenches because this is our position. And he never did that. And unfortunately, what then emerged is this vacuum. And if there's a vacuum, especially in politics, well, a vacuum anyway, if there's a vacuum, somebody will fill that vacuum. And we got to a ludicrous situation in the Labour Party conference in September 2018, where Starmer makes a speech and puts in and there will be Remain as an option on the ballot paper. And the CLP delegates, hundreds of them, rose, gave him a standing ovation. Oh my God, it's just unbelievable. I couldn't believe what was happening. The lack of clear leadership. If Jeremy had done what he should have done, first of all, there would have been no Starmer being the Brexit secretary. And therefore, there wouldn't have been that ambiguity about what is Labour's position. And there wouldn't have been the split, the very evident split that occurred. And so it was just tragic what had happened. It moved. What people forget, Remainers, and huge amounts of money involved behind their campaign, very clever and educated people, and in the Labour Party, did they not realise that they were sowing the seeds of their own defeat? Because you might recall that after 2016, when we voted to leave the EU, UKIP vanished, just became a sideshow. Farage left to do other things.
It's the US, he was going to become a talk show host.
Yeah, exactly. And what happened in 2019, because the unthinkable had suddenly become possible, i.e., we've had a referendum, a result has been declared, but now people are saying, hang on, we can reverse that. And what happens? They spawned the Brexit Party. The Brexit Party was born because he said, oh, hang on, maybe my work hasn't finished. From the moment the Brexit Party was born, it was evident, he said it often enough, it was evident that he was going to attack Labour heartland seats. And I just was beside myself that people couldn't see that. The leadership couldn't. Jeremy was lost to know what to do. Jeremy is somebody who, lovely man, decent, genuine man. He doesn't particularly like confrontation. And of course, he was trying to figure out how to keep the two sides of his own party together. Remember, in his constituency, they'd voted 70% to remain. In Ian Lavery's constituency, the chair of the Labour Party, they'd voted 70% to leave. And he tried to not offend anybody. But of course, it just disintegrated into a ludicrous situation where leaders of the party could say anything they liked. We then had, if you recall, in 2019, the European elections, the most useless elections we've ever had in the history of our nations. And suddenly there was panic. In fact, it's my belief that John Mack, I think he did a fabulous and remarkable job. I like him a lot, but I think he panicked because there was always
Can I just say, your book is very even-handed in all of this stuff, which I really admire, and it's why people should read. You're not casting blame. You say he's done so much good, and then at this particular moment, he came up short. Sorry. Yeah,
he did. John had this fear that the party might split, the Labour Party might split, and I think exaggerated the Chukaramuna group, those bunch of irrelevant individuals that nobody can remember their names now anyway, and felt that if we'd have dismissed or Remain as an option, and then of course for some unbelievable reason, the European elections, people read into that the country was Remain. You recall Labour did badly, the Tories did even worse, and the two winners, if that's the right terminology, was the Liberals and the Brexit Party. And all that election told us was that the country was still split down the middle. We knew that anyway. And I took on the kind of Scouse characteristic, a stereotype of telling people to calm down, calm down, stop panicking. I think John did panic, and I think we lost John at that stage. He started to believe that we should move to Remain, or at least put it. And so It was awful. You asked me, when did I know we were going to lose? Almost as soon as that happened. You had Jeremy with his two closest friends, Diane Abbott and John Mack, in either ear, telling him that we had to move towards Remain. I don't believe Jeremy wanted to for one moment. But it was lost. We were lost then, and there was no way back. And I remember saying to John, I went to see him and I said, John, look, tell me how, if we move towards Remain, because I was only interested in Corbyn getting into number 10. That's all that was interested in me. How, if we move to Remain, can we win? Because if you can explain that to me, I'll go to the top of the highest building in London and start shouting, Remain, Remain, Remain. And he gave me an answer. He said, Len, our troops are crumbling, and without an army, we won't be able to win. I challenged that, and I said, I'm not sure that's true, John. And he rebuked me, and he said, I'm telling you it's true. I go round the country, Len. You don't. And I said, okay, fair enough. But let me tell you this, John. I go round my members, and in our heartlands, I am being told repeatedly by shop stewards that our members are turning against us and seeing it as a betrayal. That's what I'm being told. And I left the meeting and I said, I hope you're right and I'm wrong. Because it was clear. And unfortunately, what happened.
The European elections were really interesting because for the second successive round of European elections, an explicitly Eurosceptic party finishes first. You have UKIP in, 2014, Brexit Party this time. I think the Brexit Party gets 10% more than the Liberal Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow, despite Nigel Farage being the first political leader who's not from either major party, coming first, not in one major election, but two, this is a sign that Britain doesn't want to leave the European Union. And I felt like, what does it take to get this through people's heads? If you don't have a soft Brexit, and people say, oh, that doesn't exist. All right, well, let's just say you leave the European Union and we don't have what we have right now, which I think was very possible. We think that was very possible, right? If you don't do that, we're going to have what we have today, which is hard Brexit, and all the chaos that ensues. And my worry is, and it's something I've thought about actually in the subsequent years, is that, I believe in a member-led democracy. I do. I'm not saying I believe in that Bennite conception of the Labour Party, but it was also clear that the Labour membership itself was in noddy land about the issue. And I know there was a vacuum of leadership, and I know that obviously you've got this multi-million-pound campaign, all true, but I also think it told us something about the complexion of the Labour Party membership, which was disproportionately, not entirely, disproportionately southern, disproportionately larger cities, disproportionately social liberal values. And that's not to say everybody in Labour was middle class, because that's a claim which is not true. And the idea that the people that joined Corbyn were higher incomes is also not true. But it did suggest that there are downsides to being a party which is all about the membership, because those considerations of, well, okay, we do this, we can't form a government, seem secondary. I was talking to people for most of 2019, or the first half of 2019, and I was saying, well, if we do this, then you're not going to have a socialist government. They said, oh, well, and I just thought, what has happened to you? It was like a kind of a mass mania, or a big psychological shift. Did it make you reconsider, democratic politics within Labour?
No, but Remainitis, as I say in my book, was a disease that arrived before COVID. It did kind of distort people's thinking. And of course, I'm not going to attack those hundreds of thousands of people who joined Corbyn's Labour. It was fabulous to see so many young people. But of course, that's why the trade unions are important to Labour, because whilst, if I take one of our largest plants, Jaguar Land Rover in Solihull, 15,000 workers, how many of them are actually Labour Party members? I don't know. But the vast majority of them would be Labour voters. And so the trade union values and thoughts and views are important to feed in. And they were ignored in a way that, unfortunately, it started to look like the London-centric metropolitan Labour Party were dismissing the views of ordinary working people.
I'm going to have to push back on that a little bit, because the leadership of the GMB, a very large private sector trade union, they sort of pride themselves on, and they do a great job. I know many people who've done very well out of the GMB representing them. They've fought very hard for their members. Being a sort of blue-collar union, they adopted a second referendum. The TUC sort of championed a second referendum. So Remainitis wasn't just limited to...
But that's not strictly true. And forget the TUC, because, of course, the majority of the TUC are not affiliated to the Labour Party. There's only 12 unions affiliated to the Labour Party. And those 12 unions, I have to say, at my instigation, put together a position that all 12 of us agreed with. And the key, we put two options forward, and the key of the second option was that Labour's position would be that we would go into the election on the basis of respecting the 2016 referendum.
This is in 2018, right? You're doing this?
Yes, yeah. That was Labour's position. That was the trade union's position, unanimously. All 12 unions, including the GMB, said our position is we'll go into this election respecting the 2016 referendum, and if we win, we will take people out. We will take us out of the European Union, and that was critical. Yes, to arrive at a compromise, we said, and we will put that deal that we've concluded back to the people, and an option on that ballot back to the people would be, or you can remain in the EU. Now that was that was a unanimous position that we adopted from the trade unions, and it was a good position. There was an element of compromise in it. I remember Dave Prentice of Unison said, "Len, you'd be prepared for there to be a referendum as an option on a deal going back to the people." And I said, yeah, I was absolutely confident that a Labour government, a Corbyn government, would take us out of the European Union and would do so on a deal that would then be accepted by the British people, because we'd be all campaigning in favour of that deal. So that was the GMB's position as well. So we were united. Unfortunately, we had the ludicrous situation when it was eventually kind of taken on board by the leadership of people like Emily Thornberry, Keir Starmer, John Mack, who were the negotiators, and were being asked the question, so, okay, if Labour get into power, you'll take us out of the EU and you'll negotiate a deal and you'll put it back to the people. Will you campaign for that deal? And they would say, no, we'll campaign to remain. Or I've never come across anything so stupid in politics in my life. That here you were telling the British people, we're sending a group of people in to negotiate the deal to take us out of the European Union. We're going to put that back to the people, but the very people who've negotiated the deal are going to campaign against it. That'd be like me with an employer saying, right, let's do a deal. Okay, we've reached a deal. And the employer's saying, okay, great, we've reached a deal. Yeah, that's the deal. But by the way, I'm going to go outside now to my members and I'm going to campaign against the deal. Utter nonsense, infantile by those involved in it. And of course, the media cut Labour to pieces. Jeremy was forced in the end when what's your position? And he said, well, I'll adopt a neutral position in a campaign like that. Meanwhile, you had the bold Johnson just winning an election on 3 words, get Brexit done.